Okay, I'm going to read another really short one. This piece is a microfiction piece. Microfiction is kind of close to prose poetry. Microfiction is generally trying to convey a story in under a paragraph. So I have a story here that's 2 sentences. Think 4th of July and seeing fireworks. Okay? So the title of this one is Starbuck 4th of July, or What is More American to a Child. Dynamos of color explode in electric brilliance overhead, bleeding reflections on the water below as the delayed reverberations boom. In their wake, the outlines of suited spiders shadow the night, dangling, drifting, descending before the next vibrant, rocketing ascent. Okay, I have just 2 more, and they're both a little bit shorter. This one is called Boot Hill. Mid-morning, he walked onto the porch and looked over his seed potatoes. Soaking in the sun, the potatoes had begun to sprout into nub antlers. A few had tangled together and spread in webbed filigrees. Most had only just begun to sprout, the eyes developing a physical gaze that slowly reached out for what they could not see. Content that they're ready to plant soon, he walked back into the kitchen to find a knife. The knife ran through the potatoes in careful dissection, 2-inch cubes with 2 to 3 eyes looking out from each of the squares. Some of the smaller potatoes he simply cut in half. He finished cutting, wiped his starched hands across his overalls, and reached into his pocket to pull out a velveteen box. He opened it, looked at the object inside with a slight smile, and closed it shut again. He returned it to his pocket. He'd worked for some time cultivating the soil on Boot Hill, a mound that climbed from a slight valley of gently sloping fields around it. His father had told him the rest of the field space was already accounted for, but the machinery never did well on Boot Hill, and if he wanted to, that was where he could plant his crop of potatoes. The hill stood distant, its base lined with rows tallying the years of its existence. He marched out to Boot Hill to turn the soil one last time before planting. The rows were spaced every 3 feet and ran up the eastern and northern sides. With the hoe, he quickly turned the soil one last time. It had been 2 days since he cut the seed potatoes, and they had scarred nicely. The few that had not healed properly, he discarded so that they did not infect the rest. He slung the bag of seed potatoes around his neck and shoulders, but before he started to plant, he pulled the velveteen box from his pocket and opened it. There was something about looking at that diamond ring during his work that excited him. She didn't know that he'd bought the ring, or that he was planning on proposing. He enjoyed thinking of the moment he would ask her, the moment he would pull the box from his pocket and open its lid for her to see. He did not trust to have the ring anywhere but with him, and it stayed in his front pocket at all times, resting against his thigh. At night, it sat snugly in the toe of his boot along the side of his bed. He bent and dropped the first seed, scarred side down, into the soil. He placed his boot heel alongside the row and placed another seed just beyond the end of his toe. Thus he worked, dropping a seed into place at the edge of each step, filling one row and working back, making his way up the hill. It was tedious, repetitive work, and the sun drew sweat from his body and soaked his shirt. The crop of potatoes, he thought, would more than pay for the ring. The jeweler in Starbuck, a friend, had agreed to loan the young man the money, payable at the end of the summer, no interest charged. He figured the north face of Boot Hill would produce enough for him to pay off most of the loan, and would need only a quarter of the rows from the east side to pay it off fully. The thought of having the ring paid in full, owned, drew him to stop and pull out the velveteen box once again. He draped his hands across his overalls and with darkened fingers removed the box from his pocket and opened it. The small rock caught the sun and glistened. Overhead, a piercing call came forth and he looked up to see a red-tailed hawk gliding against the sun. He pulled a sack of potatoes away from his side and dropped the box back into his quarters. By mid-afternoon, he had completed planting on the north side and started to work his way down the eastern slope. Step, drop a potato, step, potato, step, potato. He hadn't had lunch yet because he knew he didn't have more than a day before he'd have to get back to the fields with his brothers and fathers. But working downhill seemed easier, and he found the smooth pace and became automatic. The sun had begun to turn a rich orange when he covered the last planted row. Soaked in grime and sweat, he leaned on the hoe as a spell of dizziness washed over him. He should have eaten, he knew, but the ache in his body felt good, with the breeze chilling his back and neck and the sun warming his face and arms. Clasping and unclasping his hands, he felt the weary muscles stretch with a sense of accomplishment. His younger brother called from somewhere near the house. He hollered back. He moved the sack slung about him and reached down into his pocket, but there was nothing. He reached and spread his calloused fingers into every corner, but grasped nothing. He dropped to his knees and flung open the sack. He rummaged fretfully through the cubed spuds, looking for the velveteen box. He shoved the sack aside and looked at the ground beneath. He leaned back on his knees and looked up to the fresh eastern base of Boot Hill. He tried to think of the last time he'd taken the ring out, but he couldn't remember. He didn't think it had been on the northern side, and so he stood and ambled to the eastern side. He looked at the ascending rows and didn't know if it was better to work from the bottom up or down from the top. He grabbed the hoe and sauntered a quarter of the way up the hill and swung the hoe into freshly overturned soil. He pulled it toward him and watched the dirt mount and spill along the sides. He stopped. The hoe pulled up too much dirt and he didn't want to strike the box with it, so he straddled the row, kneeled on the uneven landscape, and began to burrow his hands into the earth. He shuffled his way along the row and searched for a cube-shaped object. The sun descended into the horizon. His sore back sent twinges through the muscles and caused him to rise on raw knees and arch to alleviate the pain before dipping his hands back into the earth again. Twilight passed, but the night had yet to illuminate the landscape, and so he searched blind, clasping open-eyed spuds, scooping up dirt, and dragging his fingers through and over unmoved earth. A lethargy he'd never known calmly coated his body, but he wasn't going to stop until he found the box. He wasn't going to pay off the loan without having anything to show for it. Just over 3/4 of the way up the hill, he felt the cube without the slimy film. He jerked it from the earth and rolled onto his back in bursts of exhaustive laughter. He gripped the box in a tight fist and felt dirt embedded and matted into the velveteen lining. He rose and stared down the sloping face of the hill and collected the hoe and sack of potatoes. He ambled through the field to the dimly glowing house. He set the hoe in the barn and dumped the potatoes. He hung the sack from a nail, the whole time holding the box in a clenched fist. When he stepped onto the porch, he found his father waiting for him, but he waved off his father's inquisitive comments with shrugs and tired eyes. He slouched up the stairs and into his bedroom. He ripped off his boots and dropped the dirty box into one of them. He stopped, stared at the shadow lying in the heel, and reached down. He pulled out the box, walked to his closet, and put the box on the shelf in the farthest corner. He shuffled back to bed and collapsed without washing his face or hands or removing any of his clothes. The next morning, his mother woke him and let him know that his father was waiting for him outside. He washed quickly and put on a change of clothes. His body was sore and he was tired, and the sun was already warm when he stumbled back into the day. Around the corner of the house, his father stood, looking at Boot Hill. The eastern slope looked as if it had been mauled. Only a few rows above and below the shambled area was still intact. He counted the remaining rows and hoped it would be enough to pay off the loan. as long as the northern side grew well. His father looked at him with a slight smile. "I don't think those are going to grow too well," he said, and ambled toward the field. He looked to Boot Hill, arched his back, and followed his father. He thought of the dirt-covered box tucked away now in his closet.